service. He began his career as a teacher from 1967 to 1970. He became headmaster of the Charleston Secondary School from 1977 to 1981. And then he switched to finance. He was the manager of the St. Kitts, Nevis and Willa National Bank, Nevis branch from 1981 to 1983. Began his public service as a permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Nevis administration from 1983 until 1986. He has a rich, rewarding political career also. He was the member and founder of the Concerned Citizen Movement Party in 1987. He became a member of the Nevis Island Assembly in 1987 until present. Became a member of the National Assembly from 1989 until present. Became a member of the opposition Nevis Island Assembly from 1987 to 1992. From 1992 until 2006, he was the Premier of Nevis. Was elected Premier of Nevis in 2030. But he's also one who loves community involvement. He was a former representative of the Nevis cricket team. And we all remember he was a renowned cricketer. He was founding president of the Nevis Football Association in 1974. Founding president of the Nevis Amateur Athletic Association in 1974. He's president of the Nevis Cricket Association in 1986. And he takes time for extramural activities. And he's the representative of the University of the West Indies extramural representative from 1974 to 1977. He comes well educated with a bachelor's degree from the University of the West Indies and a master's degree from the University of the Virgin Islands. He's a Christian. I've known him to be a friend of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I had the privilege of working along with him as a leader when I served in the island of Nevis. He's a good man. Ladies and gentlemen, most of all, he's a Christian. I'm delighted, and I want you to join me in welcoming our keynote speaker for tonight, Honorable Vance Winkworth Amory.
Madam Chair, I'd like to greet all of the delegates who are here, but especially the pastors on the platform and other pastors in the audience, and to, like you, also recognize Archdeacon Emeritus Valentine Hodge, a good friend of mine, and also I see my friend Pastor Connor. I think I hope I have not overstepped my bounds, because I try to be correct in what I say, because once you said it, that's it, it's gone. Can't come back. But I need to recognize him because he's one of the special advisors in the federal government to the Federal Minister of Education, Youth and Sports. And before I speak to you from the text which is here, we just heard one of the sweetest voices. That may be somewhere there, but I think her rendition was really wonderful. thank God for doing that. And I think before that we had the praise group singing. I was inside and they started to sing. And they did a good job as well. And the little baby who sang the national anthem, what can you say? We need to start them to become involved in culturally uplifting issues which will help them to be molded in the way we want them to go. Otherwise, we stand the risk of losing them. And I think your theme speaks to one aspect of that. And I want to say to you how very pleased I am to be here standing in for the Prime Minister, because that is what I'm doing. But anything I say is my own responsibility, nothing to do with the Prime Minister. I will take full responsibility, full blame for anything I say. If it's controversial, in St. Kitts and Nevis, I won't get prosecuted or persecuted. Maybe in the Middle East or somewhere else. But here, the freedom of speech, the freedom to worship, but also the freedom to be respectful of other people's rights and freedoms is critical to our existence as a country. And when Pastor James spoke and gave you the welcome, you know, I admire his eloquence. I think he has a way with words. But I'll say no more. I'll let it stand as it is. But thank you very much, Pastor James, for your introduction as well, and also for welcoming the delegates from all over the Caribbean to this conference. I've been charged to speak to you, give you the keynote address, but I feel more like talking to you and giving you a charge, because you have a very big responsibility as you enter this convocation, this conference for this weekend, looking at the religious liberty, values, laws, and international crises. Are those things interwoven? Is there connection, or are there divergences between religious liberty, values, laws, and the international crises? When we look at the state of the world, when we listen to the news, when we hear the reports from the media, I think every single one of us who has a modicum of understanding recognizes that we are in very challenging time in our history. Very challenging time. We hear of the rumors of wars. We hear of the persecution, the refugee situation in the Middle East, in Europe, the pressures which that situation of the refugees leaving their homeland because of the threat of war, the destruction of their homelands, the destruction of so many wonderful historic sites, things which have been held dear over the years, important monuments being destroyed, seeking to restore order. Is there some kind of paradox there? You're destroying things to restore order. And these are some of the things that you'll have to deal with when you discuss the religious liberty and the values and the laws and international crises. And I will not make a definitive statement about the interconnectivity. I'll just ask, is there some interconnectivity between those things. Because when you look at what is happening in the Middle East with ISIS, ISIL, whatever you want to call it, and the extreme Islamists, and the way they seek to persecute, destroy anything which is antagonistic or antithetical to them, it tells you that we have a serious problem on our hands. And this is not something which is new. It is not new. We've had this situation where the Islamophobes, where Islamists have had this tendency to be very antagonistic to any other religious faith or people of other religious faiths. And therein lies the problem, and I will not dare to venture to assume that I or anyone has the answers, because if we had the answers, we would not have the problem. Problems would have been solved. So when the ISIS soldiers are told that they must rape the women to make them Muslim, that clearly is not religious freedom, that is confusion. A clear indication that we are in a state of crisis. We look at the unfolding situation and the unpredictability of what transpires in Syria, in Iraq, and those places where ISIS is seeking to manifest its authority and its control. And as I said, we see destruction, because that is the method which is being used to counteract what seems to be a barbaric behavior and disregard for the sanctity of life. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, would have seen the unfortunate video of Christians being beheaded. But I think I will say no more about that, because it does give one a sense of almost hopelessness. But are we to be hopeless? And if we believe that religious liberty, and if we believe that, as the young lady sang, that Christ died to give us hope and to, because he loved us, then there is hope. And we have to look at how do we counteract what is transpiring. Do we do it with the weapons of war, or do we seek to do it with the power of love? We talk of religious liberty, and the Bible warns against the using religion as a cloak for doing things which are improper. When you do your study, you will find the exact quotation for that. That we ought not to use our religion as a cloak for doing what is wrong. And in the case of the extremists, that seems to be what is happening. Then we look at the issues of our values. What are values? Values are those tried and tested methods or ways of behavior in our societies, which we have accepted over time as being necessary for the peaceful, harmonious coexistence of peoples in community. Honesty, tolerance, integrity, respect for others' freedoms. And we are aware of the statement that your freedom ends where the other person's freedom begins. And that's something which we've accepted over the years. You cannot trespass on another man's rights because you feel you have freedom to do or right to do something. There has to be that respect for the peaceful coexistence of people in community. And the values which we have sought to inculcate in our children over the years so that they continue to prosper in community. We find that those values are being challenged. And unfortunately, we find that there is a tendency to call right wrong and wrong right. There's a tendency within our communities to disregard and to disrespect others. People with disabilities sometimes discriminate against them. People with different sexual orientations, we discriminate. Is that right? Is there a place for tolerance and for acceptance of other people's behaviors if they're not abrogating our own space, our own freedoms? And so over years, you get the lawmakers or the leaders of different countries engaging in the creation of laws to govern their societies. Laws which deal with the respect for life and liberty, respect for religious freedoms, the right to assembly. And these have over time gone through amendments, made changes to accommodate some of the adjustments or the changes which we make in our own lives. And this is not just common to the United States. We know the United States has become the, quote unquote, the standard bearer for some things. The United States of America has become the universal police force for the world, policing everything. But sometimes we question whether they police their own situations well enough. But here we are, because we are people and individuals in society, there must be standards, there must be values which govern and guide how we act and how we behave. And it is in the acceptance of those standards, acceptance of those behaviors which are predicated on biblical teaching. I think sometimes we forget the power of the Bible. And I'm not here preaching, I'm just telling you what is historic. As a student of history, you go back and you look at the evolution of and the Reformation in the middle, after the Middle and Dark Ages. And the church played an exceptional, strong, and pivotal role in the way our communities were developed and structured. And the principles expounded in the Bible were the basis for those laws and those rules and values. Now, if we throw away the basis on which our societies were founded, it's like taking the foundation away from a building. And if you take a foundation away from a building, what do you get? Collapse. Hence my own little statement about the United States. Not that I don't love the people of the United States. I don't value their contribution to the world because it has been great. There's never been a nation as great as the United States of America in the history of mankind. And we need to look at what is there, but looking and being tolerant and seeking to understand, we also need to look at our own situations within the Caribbean islands, because we too have our challenges. And our history has taught us and given us very strong rules and values by which to live. The respect for the family, the respect for elders, the love of children, and the need, perhaps more than the need, the instruction to ensure that our children are brought up in the admonition and fear of the Lord, and that they are taught. These are things which we in the Caribbean must not shy away from, must not allow ourselves to be forced to abrogate those things. Because if we were to do that, we are weakening our society, and we are contributing to the international crisis if we do not stand fast and stand firm on the values which we have inherited, which we have learned over the years. I recognize that there are challenges which the new technologies pose for our children. I recognize that parents find it easier to buy a Playboy or a phone or a computer for the children and let them go in a corner somewhere and play with it. I'm sure you want to examine whether or not that is really the way to strengthen our values and to reduce our crises. I will not make a final judgment on that, because I'm sure we'll be discussing all of those things, because family values, the nurturing of children are very important issues in terms of our values and in terms of our laws, because we have children's rights. We have, I said, the right of children, and within St. Kitts and Nevis, we did pass the Education Act some years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but in that act, there are some very strong rights given to children. When you speak to teachers, they would say to you that they felt that their own right and authority was being abrogated, that the authority to discipline, and I'm not saying discipline in the sense of abusing, because there's a big difference between the abuse of a child and the disciplining of a child. And if you speak of discipline of children or discipline of anybody, you go back to the dictates of the Bible, and it is right there. Do not spare the rod and spoil the child. You know it as well as I do. Are we following those laws? Because sometimes we think of laws, as I said, we think of the laws which are promulgated by Parliament. But there are other laws on which human endeavor and human behaviors and social interaction are based, which are not promulgated by Parliament. So we look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which sought to deal with a specific situation which exists in the United States of America. We look at the work of Martin Luther King and his brave band of soldiers, of men, to challenge the system of segregation. And out of that movement came laws which were made, promulgated to redress the situation of discrimination. But has discrimination been removed? There seems still to exist vestiges of discrimination. In the news in the last couple of days, there was so much talk of this indiscriminate and senseless shootings here in our own country, St. Kitts and Nevis. We've had a spate of that over the last 10, 15 years. And we are grappling with those crises, because these are crises for us. When we get one young man or an older man or someone robbed or a young person killed through senseless act, this for us is a crisis, because we get advisories issued by the United States and by the European countries. Don't go to St. Kitts and Nevis because the place is violent. And then we get some of our own people saying they feel safer in the United States than they feel in St. Kitts and Nevis. What rubbish. Absolute nonsense. They feel safer in the United States than they feel in their own country. And these are things that we need to address our minds to within the context of our religious discussions, but also in the context of our social evaluation and seeking to move our societies forward. I want to commend the Seventh Adventist Church, which filed an amicus curiae brief with the United States Supreme Court in advance of its same-sex marriage ruling. And you will no doubt discuss that as well as you go through your conference. And in looking at that, it says the church has held strongly the belief that all people, regardless of their sexual orientation, are loved by God. Now, it goes back to the fundamental principle of the teaching of the Bible. That's where it goes. So I want to commend the Adventist Church for taking a stance and not being cowed to make that challenge or that representation. We could also look as we look at religious liberty, values, laws, and international crises as matters which may seem far removed from us in some cases. But as your General Secretary said to the Prime Minister in his note to him when he was inviting him to come to speak to you, and I quote what he says to the Prime Minister on a letter dated the 3rd of May. Religious liberty has become a very sensitive and explosive issue. Sensitive and explosive. Because when we think of religion, we think first and foremost about peace and love, harmony. Then when we look at it becoming an explosive issue, we now have to redress our minds. What has gone wrong? And these are things which I would like you to challenge yourself on, so that we, at the end of it, as you heard in the prayer, that the agenda which you have set yourself, individually, collectively, and as a conference, at the end of it, you would have to determine whether or not that agenda or the expectation you had has been satisfied. Now, surrounding all of these things, clearly there are differences of opinion, and there are even controversies. But I want to say to you that do not be afraid of differences of opinion. A difference of opinion should seek or should strengthen you if your opinion is based on firm principles. If your opinion is based on false principles, you don't have a defense. You don't have a defense. And so as I close, I want to say to you that I deem it a great honor and a privilege to have been asked to deputize by the Prime Minister and to speak to you. And I want to also give you the greeting from the Prime Minister, because he has another event at which he had to preside today. And to say to you that in St. Kitts and Nevis, we are a society based on laws. We have held fast to tried and tested values of the ages. However, we sometimes see deviations as we get pressures from other sources. But the core values still exist. And it is to those core values we must still look and to which we must still hold. And I want to submit that as we discuss that the international crises about which we are so concerned, we may not be able to do anything about them now, but one of these days all crises will be over. Thank you and God bless you.